Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one who has no partner and no similar, the one who has no length and no width and no depth and no perimeter, the one who is not a volume and is not in a place. And how could he be in a place when he existed before time and space? He speaks without sound, letter, or language, not Arabic, Hebrew, nor Korean. He's not light, he's not a spirit, he has nothing in common with human beings. He's not in the direction of up, down, right, left, front, nor back. And whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different than that. He created everything except himself, including you and your actions. Nothing happens except by his will, both good and bad, he destined to happen. And I bear witness that our noble, unrivaled Master, Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the slave of Allah, his final messenger, and the best of all of God's creations. May Allah unite us with him in paradise and grant us to drink from his basin. And may Allah increase us in patience, humility, knowledge, and comprehension. And may he help us to put our knowledge into practice and grant us all sincere intentions. Ameen. Before we start, I want to remind you that the book that we're going to do next after completing the 7 Hadeeth is this book, The Straight Path, called in Arabic, As-Siratul Mustaqim. There should be a link in the, in the chat box for where you can get a copy of it, insha'Allah ta'ala. I remind you also that I'm going to be traveling. So we'll have class tonight and we'll still have class next week. But after that, I'm going to be gone for several weeks. So we won't be starting this book until after I return. So you still have time to get it, insha'Allah ta'ala, if you need it. Other than that, we're continuing in this book, the 7 Hadeeth. We're very close to the end now. MashaAllah, we're in the sins of the body. In my copy, it is on page 60. In my copy, we're on page 60. We've arrived at number 11, mashallah, on page 60 in this book. So with that, let's get started. It says, number 11, and we're talking about the sins of the body. I remind you that the sins of the body, this group is something like a catch-all. These are for the sins that don't have any particular body part associated with them. So they're just called sins of the body because you can do them with really any body part. Number 11, it says, among the sins of the body is to imitate the believer mockingly. So one of the things that's sinful is for you as a Muslim to mock another Muslim. For example, by imitating his actions, by imitating his words, by imitating his mannerisms. These kind of things, if you're doing this in order to make fun of him, this is haram. And it's counted among the sins of the body. Number 12, it says to spy on people pursuing their defects. What does that mean? It means that among the sins of the body is for you to spy on people. For example, for you to go through their things, or for you to follow them around, okay, or for you to ask people about them. Hey, what does that guy do? What does that guy do? Etc. What does he do in his spare time? Did you see him do this? Okay, if you're doing these sorts of things with the purpose of what? Pursuing their defects, meaning you want to discover something that he would not want you to know. You're trying to find out something that is like a fault of his. As you know, as Muslims, we should cover our own faults and cover each other's faults. So among the sins of the body is for you to go around trying to discover people's faults. Number 13, to tattoo. Among the sins of the body is to get a tattoo or to give a tattoo. Okay, what exactly is a tattoo? To tattoo is to put ink beneath the skin. Okay, a tattoo is not on top of the skin, it's under the skin. Okay, it's to put ink beneath the skin by use of a needle or something like a needle until that place becomes black, or blue, or potentially some other color. Nowadays, they can put all kinds of colors in it. In the past, it would only be black or blue. This is called tattooing. For you to get a tattoo on your body is an enormous sin. And for you to give a tattoo to someone else is also an enormous sin. This is among the things that our Prophet ﷺ cursed the one who does this. This means it's a very serious sin. So please, I beg you not to get a tattoo. And if you have a tattoo, I encourage you to save up money so you can have it removed. Number 14, to shun a Muslim for more than 3 days without an Islamically valid reason. What does that mean? It means that among the sins of the body is for you to shun a Muslim, like to stop speaking to him, to avoid him, to not even give him the Islamic greeting. You don't even salam him. Or if he salams you, you don't even respond to it. This is called shunning him. Okay? If you shun a Muslim for more than 3 days, then this is haram unless you have an Islamically valid reason. Okay, what you should understand from that for you to do it for 2 days is permissible. Even for 3 days is permissible. But what's haram is to do it for more than 3 days. So 3 days is the limit, 3 days and nights, meaning 72 hours. That's the limit for how long you can shun a Muslim unless you have an Islamically valid reason. For example, if that person is an enormous sinner who continues to do enormous sins, like he drinks alcohol on a regular basis, so you can continue shunning him more than 3 days in this case, as a way of applying pressure on him for him to stop his sins. Number 15, to sit with an innovator or a committer of enormous sins, fasid, to entertain him in his sinning. So among the sins of the body is for you to entertain someone else while that person is sinning. Okay, this is haram, but it's especially haram if the sin this person is doing is an enormous sin. Okay, like for example, if the person is an innovator in Aqidah, this person has a belief other than the belief of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. For example, he has the belief of the Wahhabis, or he has the belief of the Mu'tazila, or he has the belief of the Khawarij, or he has the belief of the Shia, or he has the belief of, some of the astray Batiniya beliefs, or he has the beliefs of the Murji'ah. Okay, there are several different Aqidah innovations that take a person either out of Islam or just make him an astray Muslim, make him an enormous sinner. For you to sit with a person, meaning he's doing some sin and you are sitting with him, like keeping him company while he's doing it, that's sinful for you. Okay, so like if he is saying these innovative ideas and you don't walk away, then you're committing an enormous sin by sharing in his enormous sin. Or if he's doing some enormous sin other than innovation, such as drinking alcohol, such as getting a tattoo, such as committing zina. Okay, these types of sins, if someone is doing these types of enormous sins in your presence, what you need to do is command them to stop or walk away. But you will be committing a sin if you sit down with him and continue to keep him company as he's doing this. One quick thing here, if you have a Islamically valid excuse to be with him, then in this case, it's not haram. Like for example, say this person is your business partner and you have a pressing matter of business that you need to inform him of And so you go there and you talk to him just for what's required, to do what's necessary, just to inform him of what's going on in the business, to get the response you need from him, and then for you to leave him. That short period of time that you were with him while he's drinking alcohol is not haram because you had a need. But if you would have stayed there longer than the amount of time you needed, then it would have been haram on you. Someone asked about shunning a Muslim. Does that include how Muslims block each other on Facebook? I do not understand it to mean that. What I understand from shun a Muslim is like real life interaction. The person is right there with you and you're ignoring him. As for Facebook, I mean, people don't even log into Facebook all that regularly. Okay, what if I logged into Facebook and then I didn't log in for another year? Then there would have been a lot of posts and things that I didn't even see. It doesn't mean I'm shunning the person. It just means I didn't log in. And if you block him, then that's not the same thing as shunning. Number 16, among the sins of the body is for a man to wear gold, silver, silk, or what is mostly silk, with the exception of a silver ring. So there are certain things that men are forbidden to wear. Okay, among those things are gold. It is haram for a man to wear gold anywhere on his body, so whether it be gold, like, around your neck, on your hand, whatever. Okay, it's forbidden for men to wear gold. It is forbidden for men to wear silver. And it's forbidden for men to wear silk. And when we say silk, we're talking about real silk, meaning the fibers that are produced by the silkworm. Okay, if you have a cloth or a fabric or something that's made out of actual silk fibers, then as long as, how do I say this? If the silk content of that garment is greater than 50%, then in that case, it's haram for the man to wear. So if it's like some kind of, garment that has like silk and cotton, as long as the majority of it is cotton, then the man is permitted to wear it. But if the majority of it is silk, then the man is not permitted to wear it. Most of the things nowadays that are labeled as silk are not actually silk. They're not made by actual silkworms, but they're made in a lab. They're synthetic silk. Synthetic silk does not carry the same ruling that actual silk carries. Similarly, this ruling about gold and silver, not being able to wear gold and silver, it applies to gold and to silver. It doesn't apply to other types of metals that people might want to wear, such as platinum or palladium. It applies to gold, silver, and silk. It says, with the exception of a silver ring. So although it's forbidden for a man to wear silver, he's allowed to wear one silver ring. So that's like the maximum amount of silver he's allowed to wear, and it can only take the form of a ring. Okay, but a man is permitted to wear one silver ring. MashaAllah. As for women, they're permitted to wear all of that. Women are allowed to wear gold, they're allowed to wear silver, they're allowed to wear silk. Okay, as much gold as they want, as much silver as they want, as much silk as they want. These restrictions are just on men. Number 17, among the sins of the body, is to be with a marriageable woman when a third person whom one would be shy in front of, either male or female, is not present. Khalwa. Okay, this sin is called khalwa. It's counted among the sins of the body. It's for a man and a woman who are not mahrams. Okay, these are people who, if the circumstances were right, they would be allowed to be married. Okay, under the right circumstances, they would be permitted to marry each other if they wanted to. Such people, if they are alone in private, then that's haram. How can you make it permissible? By having a third person present. And that third person has to be someone you'd be shy in front of. So for example, let's say that there's, a woman in your neighborhood. She lives alone. For you to enter into her house, so it's just you and her in the house, that's haram because it's khalwa. Now, if you bring a little baby with you, it's still haram, it's still khalwa, because it's just a baby. You're not going to be shy in front of a baby. The fact that that baby is there seeing what you do is not going to stop you from the various things that a person might do. Okay, a person, you might look at her lustfully, you might touch her lustfully, you might kiss her or something. These are all the kind of things you might be shy to do in front of a third person, but you would not be shy to do those things in front of a baby. So bringing a baby in there will not break the khalwa. It will still be haram. Similarly, if you brought in a third person who was an adult, but you're not shy in front of them. Okay, like for example, say you have, two guys, they're really close friends. They both do zina all the time. They've done zina plenty times in the past. And so if one of them goes into that house with that single woman and he brings his buddy with him, okay, the fact that his buddy is there is not going to make him shy to do certain types of actions. So that particular buddy of his will not break the khalwa. It is still haram for him to enter that house with that woman. Khalwa is still present. This sin right here is a sin that requires a lot of vigilance to make sure you don't fall into it. Because we're not just talking about things like people's houses. We're talking about any place where you're in private. So yes, if you get in an elevator by yourself, the elevator is empty, you're going up, 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 up in the elevator, and then the elevator stops, and there's a woman alone who steps into the elevator. Well, brother, you better step out of the elevator before that door closes. Because for you and her to be alone in that elevator is haram. It's haram, brother. This is a sin of khalwa. Even if you have no intention to touch each other, even if you have no intention to do anything with her, merely being alone in private together is haram. I want to make sure that's understood. Number 18. For a woman to travel without a non-marriageable male or the like. So among the sins of the body is for a woman to travel anywhere without having either a mahram with her or someone like a mahram. What is a mahram? A mahram is a non-marriageable male, someone who she would never, ever, ever be permitted to marry, regardless of the circumstances. Someone like her father or her brother, for example. These are mahrams for her. She's permitted to travel if she has a mahram. Or if she has someone like a mahram. What's an example of someone like a mahram? It would be, for example, her husband. Her husband is not a mahram, but he's like a mahram in this case, because he's allowed to be alone with her and he's allowed to touch her. Okay? So the husband is like a mahram. It is only permissible for a woman to travel if she has a mahram or someone like a mahram traveling with her. And there's no distance restriction on this. Okay, when we say travel, we mean you leave the town that you reside in. That's traveling. Even if you're only going a very short distance. Say your town ends in a certain spot and you're just going to that village that's only like 3 miles away. Well, for her to travel those 3 miles is haram unless she has a mahram with her or someone like a mahram. Okay, please don't think that this travel restriction only applies to long travel, like the kind of long travel in which you'd be permitted to shorten prayers or combine prayers. No, any kind of travel, no matter how short, is forbidden for a woman unless she has a mahram or something like a mahram with her. That includes short travel. It includes any time you leave the town. As for staying inside the town, she's permitted to travel around the town without a mahram. Okay, even if the town is very big. You know, some of these cities have become very, very, very big, where a person might travel several miles without leaving the city. In this case, it's permissible for her because that's not considered to be traveling. She's still in the same city in which she resides. And I remind you that when we say city, we're not talking about the city limits that are on a map. You know, Islamically, a city is a cluster of buildings. Okay, as long as the cluster of buildings, persists as it grows, as long as the buildings are still, nearby one another, then that's considered to be a town. It's considered to be a city. It shouldn't matter if, the government drew a line in the middle of the city and said, okay, this part over here is Cambridge and that part over there is Somerville and that part over there is something else. The buildings are all running together, so Islamically it's considered to be one city, and the woman can travel around that city without a mahram. I remind you, when I say this, I'm talking about traveling. Okay, someone asked about just dropping her son off somewhere. Well, dropping off and returning home, normally that happens inside of the city. She can travel around the city without a mahram. What she can't do is leave town without a mahram. That's what she can't do. So if you're talking about driving, for example, from Philadelphia up to New York just to drop him off and then turn around, no, that's traveling. Okay, or even if you're just going from, Philadelphia to Camden, that's traveling. That's short travel, but it's traveling. I'm not aware of an age limit, neither for the woman nor for the mahram. So I wasn't taught any specific age at which the man counts as a mahram, but I think you all understand the idea behind this, which is that this mahram needs to be someone who could protect her if necessary, and someone who could, respond to situations in a reasonable way. Like if she got sick and needed a doctor, someone who would be able to get her to a hospital or at least call 911 or something. Okay, that's what we mean. We're not talking about young children who are unreliable, but I don't have a specific age at which to say this person counts as a mahram. Number 19, to coerce a free person to do labor. So among the sins of the body is to force a person to work against their will. Okay, like, for you to, take out a gun and say to someone, carry, all those bricks from here over to there, or else I'm gonna shoot you. Okay, forcing the person to work against their will is a sin of the body, and it is haram. This is haram to do if the person is what? Free. Okay, now if the person is a slave and you own that person, well, then you have the right to command them to do work, even if it's against his will. Okay, what's haram here is to command the free person to work against his will. And as I'm sure you know, that is the reality of what happened to many of our ancestors who were brought from Africa. They were free people. They were free, and they were brought here and forced to work. Okay, this is, a great injustice that was done to them, an injustice whose effects are still being felt even now. Number 20, to have enmity with a highly ranked, pious, righteous Muslim, Wali. So a Wali, mashallah, a Wali is a Muslim who has achieved a very high rank in the religion. He's received a rank so high that he's reached a point where Allah gave him a special gift. What is this gift? It is that Allah has protected him from blasphemy, protected him from kufr. Okay, if a person becomes a wali, then they're protected from kufr. It's guaranteed that they will die as a Muslim at that point. And they will not commit kufr before then either. This is a very high status. Very often it's accompanied by, amazing things that they do called karamat, but not necessarily accompanied by karamat. Many of the awliya, the word wali is singular, awliya is the plural. Many of the awliya of the past, I'm sure you've heard of. We've all heard of Abu Bakr and Omar and Uthman and Ali. These are people who were walis. They were awliya. You've heard of Ahmed ibn Hanbal and Abdul Qadir al-Jilani and Ahmed al-Rifa'i and Ahmed al-Badawi and Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili. These people were awliya. Imam Amin, mashallah, he reads to you from the books of Imam al-Haddad, who was also a wali. Okay? Among the sins of the body is to have enmity. Enmity means to regard someone as an enemy. To have enmity in your heart towards one of these people, towards a wali. This is an enormous sin. This is an enormous sin. So to do that is considered a sin of the body. MashaAllah. Number 21, to help others to sin. Among the sins of the body is to assist someone else to commit a sin. Okay, such as to pass a cup of beer to somebody. Even though you're not going to drink it, someone on that end of the table asks for the beer and you pass it to him. You just helped him to commit a sin, and by doing so, you committed a sin. Okay? MashaAllah. Reminds me of a story I heard one day about a man in Toronto or somewhere in Canada. He was a mechanic, and he was a good mechanic. He was one of those mechanics, Muslim, mashallah, one of those mechanics that his customers actually trust him. So one day he got a phone call from a family whose car had broken down, and they called him to come out and look at the car and see if he can fix it. So he drove out there, he looked at the car, he picked up the hood, he looked inside, and the family asked what the problem is, whether it's going to take a long time for him to fix. He said, "Oh no, this is nothing. It'll take just a few minutes for me to fix it." And then the family said, "Good, because we need to get to church." As soon as he heard that, as soon as he heard them say we need to get to church, well, now he can't fix the car because he'll be assisting them to do something that's haram. So as soon as he heard that, what did he say? He said, "Oh man, I just noticed it's going to take me a long time to fix this one. I think maybe that you shouldn't wait for me." He started making excuses for why he would not fix the car, because fixing the car would assist them to go to church and to commit blasphemy. That, of course, is a extreme example because there's a blasphemy example. But even for sins that are less than blasphemy, it's still haram for you to assist a person to do it. Number 22, to circulate counterfeit money. To circulate counterfeit money is haram. Like people do nowadays where they pull out the old printing press and they print out some fake dollar bills, like the 50s and the 100s and things like that, and they try to use it. That's haram. Or like in the past, before the days of paper money, when people would take copper coins and put like some gold or some silver plating around the outside of it, so it would appear to be gold, but really it's copper. These sorts of things, this is called counterfeiting money, and it's counted among the sins of the body. Number 23, to use or to obtain golden and silver utensils. So among the sins of the body is to use tools and utensils that are made of gold or silver. That includes silverware. Like if your forks, knives, and spoons are actually made out of silver, it's haram for you to use them. And if you see them in the store, it's haram for you to buy them. So it's haram for you to use them and haram for you to obtain, whether it's by buying or not by buying. It's haram for you to obtain such things, even if you have the intention of never using them. Like a person might go buy a silverware set while knowing it's haram to use, so he might say in his heart, oh, I'm not going to use it. It's just like an investment. I'm going to hold on to it and then sell it later. It's still haram. It's haram for you to buy utensils that are made of gold or made of silver. That includes cups and things like that as well, or really anything. You know, it was said that some of the rich people in America have toilets that are made out of gold. Well, that's haram. Number 24, to neglect an obligation, to do an obligation, leaving out one of its integrals or conditions, or to intentionally commit an invalidator while performing an obligation. Basically, what number 24 is saying is that among the sins of the body is for you to fail to perform an obligation. And there's several ways that might happen. It might be because you just didn't do it. Like if you knew it was time for the Asr prayer, Asr time came in, and you waited, and Asr time went out, and you never prayed it. That's called skipping an obligation. Or maybe you did start to pray, but one of the conditions wasn't fulfilled. Like, for example, you knew you did not have wudu, but then you went and you did the actions of salat anyway, so that you know that this salat was not valid. And actually, if you knowingly make salat without wudu, well, then in this case, that's blasphemy. That's considered to be playing with the deen. And that's among the things that will take a person out of Islam. Or like, so what's another way that you could fail to do an obligation? It could be you never tried. It could be you left out a condition. It could be you left out an integral. Like imagine if you went to make salat and you decided that, you know, you don't want to do sujood twice in every rak'ah. You decided that in one of the rak'ahs, you're only going to make one sajda. In that case, your salat is not valid. It's as if you did not make salat at all. Or if you did something in it to break it. Like imagine that you are in the salat, and while you're in the salat, you eat something, for example. You're in the salat, and you pull a cookie out of your pocket, and you eat it while you're in the salat. This breaks your salat. All of these are ways that the salat would not be valid. Or to put it simply, these are ways in which, we would summarize your situation by saying you did not make salat. So for you to fail to perform an obligation is a sin of the body. Excuse me for one moment, please. Number 25, to leave out the Friday prayer, Jumu'ah, when it's one's obligation, even if one prayed Dhuhr. Okay. So when we talked about Jumu'ah, we talked about the people who are obligated to pray Jumu'ah. Like, for example, men. Okay, certain men, if the other conditions are met, they need to pray Jumu'ah. Women are never obligated to pray Jumu'ah. Okay, so we're talking here about only those who are obligated to pray Jumu'ah. For them to fail to perform Jumu'ah is a sin of the body. And the fact that they prayed Dhuhr instead of Jumu'ah does not make up for the fact that it was a sin for them to skip Jumu'ah. Yes, for the person who missed Jumu'ah or failed to pray Jumu'ah or for whatever reason was not able to perform a valid Jumu'ah, then yes, that person needs to pray Dhuhr as a makeup prayer. But it doesn't change the fact that they missed Jumu'ah. Number 26, for the inhabitants of a place to leave out praying the obligatory prayers in congregation. By this we mean the 5 daily obligatory prayers. Okay, if the people of a town fail to pray all 5 prayers every single day in jama'ah, in congregation, in a sufficient number of places around town, then in that case, the people who are obligated to pray in congregation are all sinful. I remind you that this particular obligation is what we call a communal obligation, which means it's not the case that every single Muslim has to pray all of the 5 prayers in congregation. No. Okay. In fact, some people are not obligated to pray in congregation at all, such as women and children and slaves, travelers. But if you're among those that have the communal obligation upon you to pray in jama'ah, well, then as long as some of you go pray in jama'ah, then the others don't have to. The point is, a jama'ah must take place. In your town, in your city, there must be, several places around town. The number of places depends on how many Muslims there are there. But there must be several places around town where the Muslims know that the salat is held in these places. That for all 5 of the salats, there's going to be a jama'ah in these places. And so the jama'ah has to occur. A person can't pray in jama'ah by himself. You need to have at least 2 people present for all of those salats in order for the salat to happen, for this obligation to be fulfilled. And so if you failed to do it, then all of the people who are obligated communally to pray in congregation are all sinful for failing to do so. Number 27, to defer one's obligations until the time is over without an excuse. Okay. For example, if someone owes zakat, his zakat is due at a certain time, and when the time came, he had the ability to pay the zakat, but he just didn't do it. He let the time go without fulfilling his obligation. This is haram. Or like, for example, someone who did not pray Asr, and he just kept waiting until sunset came, and now Asr time is gone, and he never prayed Asr. Okay, if you do this without an excuse, then that's haram. If you have an excuse, then that's different. An excuse would be like for missing a salat, would be like if you were sleeping. Say you went to sleep at Dhuhr time, and when you woke up, it was Maghrib time. Well, then yes, Asr time came and went while you were sleeping. In this case, you have an excuse because you weren't even awake. How could you have prayed? Or like in the zakat example, like say zakat time came, but you didn't have, you weren't able to pay it because your money is in another town, for example. Say you have a certain amount of gold, and the day that you needed to pay zakat came while you were out of town. So you didn't have access to your gold on that day such that you could, in order for you to distribute it. And so you had to wait till you return home to distribute it. It's also assuming that there was no trustworthy person that you could have told to distribute it on your behalf also. Number 28, among the sins of the body is to hunt with something that kills the animal by its weight, such as a stone or a bullet. So according to the Shafi'i school, if you choose to go hunting, meaning to hunt animals for food, then whatever tool you use for hunting has to be something that harms the animal or wounds the animal by its sharpness. So for example, a knife or a sword or a spear or an arrow. These things are sharp. So it's the sharpness that injures the animal. Okay, it's forbidden to use things that harm by weight, such as to use like a big rock and drop it on the animal's head and kill it. This is haram. Or to use a gun that fires bullets. These bullets are not sharp. Okay, the harm that they cause is by the weight. Okay, the bullet has a certain weight, and because it's traveling at a speed, it hits with great momentum, and so the damage is by weight, not by sharpness. These things are forbidden to use for hunting, according to the Shafi'i school. Number 29, to use an animal as a shooting target. Okay, so among the things that are haram, among the sins of the body, is to use a living animal as target practice. Such people who just want to shoot squirrels, for example, or they just want to shoot, living animals. This is haram. Number 30. For the woman who is in a postmarital waiting period due to divorce, mu'tadda, to leave the house without an excuse. Okay, so when a man divorces a woman, she enters into a waiting period called an iddah. The woman who is in her iddah is called a mu'tadda. Okay, so for the woman who's a mu'tadda, she's in her iddah from being divorced. She needs to stay in the house until her iddah is over. She's allowed to leave the house if she has a need to do so, such as to go buy groceries, or to go to work, or to gather firewood, whatever, the normal chores that people have to do. She's permitted to leave home to do those things. Okay. She's also permitted to leave home if it's nighttime, to go to a neighbor, for example, just for, talking, companionship, and things like that. She can visit her neighbor for talking as long as she returns to her own home and sleeps in her own bed at nighttime. Okay, there are also other excuses that would permit her to leave the house, such as fear. Okay, like if the house is unstable and she's afraid the house is going to collapse on her, she can leave the house. Okay, or something like that. Okay, as for the woman who's in a postmarital waiting period due to a revocable divorce, like it was the first or second divorce of the husband, so he still retains the right to call her back to the marriage. In this case, she continues to follow the rule that applied when she was married, which is that she may not leave the home without the husband's permission. So even though while she's in her iddah, technically she's not married to the man anymore, in certain respects, it's like the marriage is still going on. And among those respects is that the man still needs to provide a home for her during this time when she's in her iddah. And among those respects is that she does not leave the home without his permission, assuming it's his house. It says, still on number 30, it says, or for the woman in a postmarital waiting period due to death, muhidda, not to refrain during that period from adornment, including clothing, perfumes, and other forms of adornment, and from leaving the home without an excuse. So if the woman's iddah is not because she was divorced, but rather it's because her husband died, in this case, she's called a muhidda, right? And what she needs to do is she needs to mourn the husband for that period of time, which is 4 months and 10 days. Okay, for that period of time, she mourns the husband by not decorating her body. So she does not wear fancy clothes or attention-gathering clothes. She does not wear makeup and perfume. She does not do any of those things. She does not attempt to beautify herself. Okay, until her waiting period is over, she stays, you might say, plain. Okay, and also she stays in the house. Just like the one who was divorced stays in the house, the one whose husband died, she stays in the house. And also similar to the one who was divorced, she's allowed to leave the house, if she has a need to do so, like going grocery shopping, like going to work, and she can leave at nighttime to visit neighbors who are women to talk to them as long as she returns home. Number 31, to stain the mosque with najis filth or to make it dirty, even with something pure. So among the things that are haram and counted among the sins of the body is to put najis filth in the mosque, to contaminate the mosque with najis filth. That includes like urine, alcohol, vomit, dead animals. Okay, remember ants. Okay, an ant, if you kill it, that body is najis. Okay, so if you see ants in the masjid, don't go around killing them. Some people, they see ants, what do? They push with their finger, try to kill a bunch of the ants. Don't kill ants in the masjid. Okay, you don't want to put najasa around the masjid. Why? Because people pray there. What if someone makes their salat right on top of that dead ant? Then after they prayed all the rak'ahs, when they finally finished, they realized, oh, there was a dead ant on me. And now they got to pray over again. Okay, no, don't do that. It says to stain the mosque with najis filth or to make it dirty. When we say make it dirty here, we mean making it dirty with something that's gross. We don't mean like actual like soil or something, not that kind of dirt. What we mean is to put something in the masjid that is religiously mustaqdhar, meaning the religion declares it to be gross. Okay, some things are mustaqdhar, they're gross, but they're not najis. An example would be like spit. For you to hawk a loogie inside the masjid, okay, that loogie that's now on the floor, that's something that's, according to the Sharia, is gross. Okay, so we don't do that in the masjid. We don't contaminate it that way. It was different back when the Prophet ﷺ was alive, because the floor of their masjid was soil. If someone spit on it, all you got to do is kick some dirt on top of it, and then you're fine. But in our masjids, it doesn't work that way. We can't just kick dirt on top of it. So you don't put things that are gross in the masjid, just like you don't put things that are najis in the masjid. Number 32, to delay performing Hajj until death, while able to perform it when alive. So among the sins of the body is for the person who was able to perform Hajj. You know how we say that Hajj is an obligation only upon those who are able? Yeah, if you're not able to make Hajj, well, then you're not obligated to make Hajj. But if you are able to make Hajj, then the obligation of Hajj is upon you. And yes, in the Shafi'i school, it is not required for you to actually make Hajj at the first opportunity. But you must make Hajj before you die. You must make Hajj when? Before you die. If you're among those that's able to make Hajj. So it's counted among the sin of the body if you were able to make Hajj and you died without doing it. Number 33, to take a loan without the ability to pay it back, without informing the lender. So for example, let's say you're someone, you have no savings, you have no job, you have no income, but you need money. So you go to someone and say, hey man, let me borrow $100. Now you know good and well you're not going to be able to pay that money back because you got no income and you got no savings. Well, it is permissible for you to borrow that money from that person, but on the condition that you explain to him your situation. You need to let him know that you're not going to be able to pay that money back. Okay, if he understands that you won't be able to pay it back and still he chooses to loan this money to you, well, then in that case, it's permissible for you to accept it. But it would be haram, though, for you to ask for that loan without making clear to him that you can't pay it back. That would be haram. Number 34, to refuse to grant more time to the one who is unable to pay his debts. What does that mean? Let's say you loaned money to someone, or for whatever reason, there's someone who owes you money. And the time in which he's supposed to pay it has already come. Okay, so that money is due right now, but he doesn't have it. He's not able to pay you what he owes. In this case, your obligation is to give him more time. Okay, you don't go over, you don't pressure him, you don't yell at him, you don't try to force him. No, you want to be patient. Okay, it's your obligation in this case to give him more time to get the money so that he can pay you back. So if you fail to give him more time, then that's haram on your part. Number 35, to spend money in disobedience. Among the sins of the body is to spend your money to do something that's haram. Okay? Such as to spend your money to listen to haram music. Now, that would be one example. Or to spend your money to get haram food. Or to spend your money on haram clothes. Like say, for example, somebody is selling clothes and those clothes are stolen. So it's haram for you to buy those stolen clothes, but you spend the money on it anyway. This is haram. Number 36, to belittle the book of the Quran or any other book of Islamic knowledge, and to enable the child who has not reached the age of mental discrimination, non-mumayyiz, to carry the mushaf. Okay, so this one, among the sins of the body, is to belittle the Quran, which is like to insult it, to treat it in a way less than what it deserves. Same with any book of Islamic knowledge. So, for example, to put the Quran on the floor, or to put a book of Islamic knowledge on the floor, or to point the bottoms of your feet at it, to extend your legs such that the bottom of your foot is pointed at these things. This is disrespect to the Quran or to the books of Islamic knowledge. And so these things are forbidden. Okay, and these are examples of things that are kufr, because belittling the Quran or belittling books of Islamic knowledge is kufr and takes you out of Islam. It is also haram, although it's not kufr, it's haram to touch the mushaf without having wudu. Okay, because this is a failure to properly revere the mushaf. It is also haram to let a child that's very young, a child that is not yet mentally discriminating, a child that's like 3 years old, for example, to let this 3-year-old child touch the mushaf is also haram. And it's all for the same reason, because it's failure to revere the mushaf properly. So this is haram on your part. 37, to change property line markers. That is, to unjustly change the markers between one's own property and that of others. Let's say you and your neighbor, you have a survey done. According to the survey, your property line ends at a certain place. But in your mind, you thought your property always ended, 2 feet further over. So you just, changed the property markers to make it appear that your property is 2 feet over. For example, when you build your fence 2 feet past the property line so that it appears to people like your property actually goes over to the fence, even though in reality, your property does not go all the way to the fence. This is a sin of the body. Similar to this is to use your neighbor's land as if it's yours while knowing it's not, and without his permission. Number 38, to use the street for that which is unlawful. So among the sins of the body is to use the street to do things that are haram, such as, to do something that harms the people as they pass by. That would be haram to use the street in that way. Number 39, to use a borrowed thing in a way one wasn't permitted. So let's say you borrow something from somebody. Okay, like say somebody has a horse. You borrow his horse. Okay, you borrow his horse for what purpose? So that you can ride on it. Okay, he gave you permission to ride on his horse. Okay, so if you instead took the horse and decided to attach it to some kind of wagon and you got it pulling fruit up and down the street so you can sell, fruits and vegetables to people, this is haram because you borrowed the animal with permission to do one thing and you decided to use the thing that you borrowed for a different purpose besides the purpose you were given permission to use it for. It says to keep it longer than permitted. It's also haram. We're still on 39 here. It's also haram if you borrowed something from someone and you were supposed to return it to him by a certain date, but you chose to just keep it longer, longer than the time that you were supposed to give it back. This would be like if you borrowed someone's dress to wear it to a certain function, they told you give it back next week, and you decided to keep it longer than next week. What else does it say? It says, or to lend it to someone else without permission. So say you borrowed something from someone. You borrowed somebody's book, for example. He gave you permission to borrow the book and read it. But then someone else sees you with the book and he asked to borrow it. So among the sins of the body is for you to then lend that book to someone else without the permission of the owner, because that book actually doesn't belong to you. You borrowed it from somebody. It's not your book. You don't get to lend it out to somebody else. Not without the permission of the owner, you don't. So among the sins of the body is for you to lend to someone else something which you borrowed and you're not the owner of, or to keep something you borrowed longer than you were supposed to, or to use something you borrowed in a way that you had no permission to use it. All of these things are listed under number 39, and they are sins of the body. Number 40. It says, to prevent others from using what is unowned, such as a meadow, or from collecting firewood from unowned land, or from extracting salt, gold, silver, or other resources from their unowned origin, or from using drinking water from a self-replenishing source. Okay, number 40 deals with the things that are common. Okay, there are certain things that are called in English commons. It means everybody has a right to it. So it is haram for you to prevent people from benefiting from the things that they have a right to benefit from. An example is unowned land. Say there's a meadow, a grassy area. It's not owned by anybody. It's unowned land. That means anybody who wants can bring their animals there to graze. If I got some sheep, I can bring them to that meadow and let them eat. If I have goats or horses or whatever, I can bring them to the meadow and let them eat there. Because the meadow doesn't belong to anyone. It's unowned. That means everyone can benefit from it. Okay, or firewood. If there's unowned land with trees or bushes and stuff on it, then you may not prevent someone from going there to gather firewood because the land is unowned. So everyone can benefit from it if they choose. For you to prevent them from benefiting from it is haram on you because you're blocking them from what they're entitled to. It also says, or from extracting salt. So here we're talking about mining. If there's land that's unowned, then anybody can dig up that land and pull out of the ground what they want to pull out of it because the land is not owned by anyone. So if someone chooses to start digging up salt or gold or silver or iron or copper or whatever, okay, you cannot stop them from doing that from unowned land. It says, or from using drinking water from a self-replenishing source. This one's a little bit different because when we're talking about drinking water here, we're not just talking about what's unowned. We're talking about whether it's self-replenishing. So if you have a well on your property, what does that mean? It means you can drop your bucket in that well, pull up a bucket full of water, and that water that you pulled out of the well gets replaced. It's not like the water in the well goes down when you pull out your bucket full of water. No, the water level stays the same. The amount that you pulled out gets replaced. Or like say a stream. Say you have a stream on your property, water running by. If you dip your bucket in the stream and pull out a bucket of water, it's not like that stream now got a little hole in it of no water. No, that water that you pulled out gets immediately replaced by the water that was right behind it. Okay, what it means is that it doesn't cost you anything to share that water. Because that drinking water, if you use it, it's immediately replaced. So you're not becoming impoverished by sharing it. And for that reason, if someone is in need of water, drinking water we're talking about, then you have an obligation to share that water with this person. Why? Because after you share it, the amount of water you have doesn't go down. This is especially true if this person is sorely in need of water. Like if they're very thirsty and on the verge of death, then in that case, it's even more seriously obligatory upon you to share the water. And while we're on the subject, it's haram to prevent a person from using the banks of a river or the shore of the ocean. According to the Sharia, the waterways are not owned by people. The waterways themselves are not owned by anyone. So the ocean doesn't belong to anyone. Nobody can say, oh, I own the ocean, or I own this part of the ocean. Anybody can go out on the ocean and go out on a boat. And when people go out on a boat on the ocean, sooner or later, they need to do what? They need to come back to shore. So if they come to shore, you can't stop them. I'll put it like this. You can't stop them from coming to shore. It's because the shore, which is right, the edge, where the land meets the ocean, that part, the shore is unowned land. No one is permitted to own the shore, like the beaches. So all these like fancy hotels you see in these vacation spots like Jamaica, where they say, this beach is for the people staying in this particular resort, all of that is against the Sharia. The beach is public. All beaches are public. You can't tell someone they can't go to the beach, okay? Because the beach is not owned by anyone. It's not owned by the resort, and it's not owned by anyone else. All people are entitled to go to the beach, and that's especially the case for people who were on the water, people who have boats and things, because they need to eventually get off the water, so they need to have access to the land. The same is true for rivers. The banks of the rivers, you can't prevent someone from using the bank of the river. Say I decide to go canoeing. I can do that because the river is not owned by anyone. Rivers are public property. So I can go canoeing as much as I want. But when I decide I'm tired and I need to rest for a little while, maybe, have a little picnic or something, what will I have to do? I'm going to have to pull over onto the bank of the river, pull my canoe up out of the river a little bit so it doesn't go away. And I sit down there on the bank and I'll eat my meal. That land that I'm sitting on by the bank of the river might belong to someone. That land might belong to someone. But even though it belongs to someone, he does not have the right to prevent me from using the bank. Yes, he can prevent me from going way off the bank, but the part that's right there next to the river, because the river is everyone's property and I'm able to use it, I also have a right to use the bank part, the part that's right near the river, for the sort of things that people need, like if they're on the river, such as pulling their boat up on the ground so it doesn't float away, sleeping right there, eating right there, just sitting and resting a little bit right there, for example. You cannot prevent a person from doing that where? At the banks of the river, even if that river is running through the middle of your property. The banks are like communal property. Number 41. To use the lost and found article, luqata, before satisfying the conditions of notification. So we didn't really go into this in this book, but if you find something that's not yours, there is no finders, keepers, losers, weepers in the Sharia. If you find something that's not yours, you have to, you need to try to return it to its proper owner. And you cannot claim it as your own until you've spent a certain amount of time trying to return it to its proper owner. In most cases, that amount of time will be 1 year. So you'll have to go out on a regular basis, even multiple times per day, with details that you'll learn once you truly learn about this subject. But you'll have to go out multiple times per day or go out according to the details for a period usually of 1 year, announcing that you found something, describing it in part. You give enough detail that the person who lost it can tell that what the item you're talking about is their item, but you don't describe it so fully that anybody could pretend it's theirs. You always hold back part of the description so that when the true owner shows up, the true owner can describe what you did not describe. And in that way verify that it really belongs to them. And then you return it to the owner. But if after the time period is up, which is usually 1 year, if the owner never reveals himself or herself, then in that case, you can claim it as your own and you may begin using it. But even then, You're using it on the condition that if the owner does show up at some point in the future, that you will still return it to them. That's how it works. And so what it's saying here is for you to use the lost and found article before satisfying all those conditions of notification, without going a whole year announcing what you found, et cetera, et cetera. In that case, it's haram. MashaAllah. Number 42, to sit in a place where disobedience is being committed without an excuse. Okay, so among the sins of the body is for you to be in a place where other people are doing haram things and for you not to warn them. You did not go and command them to do what's right. You did not go and forbid them from doing what's wrong. You just sat there without, doing anything. This is haram and it's a sin of the body. Number 43, to enter a banquet without permission or to be admitted out of shyness. So among the sins of the body is to crash somebody else's party. And if somebody has a banquet, they got food and stuff, you weren't invited, but you just show up and start eating. That's haram. It's forbidden for you to do that. And it doesn't have to be a fancy banquet either. Even if it's just somebody's cookout. This time of year, people have a lot of cookouts. Some people try to get slick, show up at the cookout, talk about, hey, what's up? They don't even know you, but you're trying to weasel your way in. Okay, this is haram. Okay. Or if they do give you permission to come in, but it was only out of shyness. So you go up to him, you're trying to get in. He's clearly not trying to let you in. But because other people are watching, you try to pull one of these, come on, man, how you going to do me like that? How you going to not let me in? What, you stingy or something? And then the guy now is feeling shy because people are watching and he doesn't want to appear stingy. He doesn't want to, whatever. So he just says, okay, you can come in. It's haram for you to go in that case. It's haram for you to go in that case. Why? Because he did not let you in out of the goodness of his heart. He let you in out of shyness, out of what we nowadays might call peer pressure. Okay, this is not a true invitation. So for you to act on it, it's haram. And this is the last thing I'm going to say for today. MashaAllah, I've gone a little bit over time. Number 44, to commit inequity among the wives in terms of obligatory spending and overnight turns. So if a man has more than one wife, he is obligated to treat them equally in certain matters. He's not obligated to treat them the same in every way, but he's obligated to treat them equally in certain things. What are those certain things? The obligatory support. So the husband has certain things that he must provide to his wife. He is obligated to provide them. So if he's fulfilling his obligation towards one wife, then he must fulfill his obligation towards all the wives. It's haram for him to fulfill his obligation to one and not to another. This does not mean he needs to spend equally on all the wives. No, he's permitted to give one wife a big house and a fancy car and then give the other house a small house and no car. Yeah, he can do that. We're not saying he has to treat the wives completely equally, but we're saying he must fulfill his obligation to all of the wives if he's fulfilling it to any of the wives. Similarly, he must be fair to them. He must treat them equally in terms of the nights that he spends with them. So if he spends a night with wife A, then he also spends a night with wife B and wife C and wife D, depending on how many wives he has. You need to treat them equally in terms of the nights you spend with them and treat them equally in terms of fulfilling your obligations. As for what's beyond the obligations, that does not have to be equal. And as it says here, being more attracted to one wife or loving her more than the other is not a sin. So again, when we say that you must treat the wives equally, we don't mean equal in every way. Okay, it's not possible for a man to love, say he has 2 wives, it's not possible for him to love each of the wives the exact same amount. It says in the Quran that you will not be able to, in terms of affection, treat your wives equal no matter how hard you try. Okay, so we're not burdened with treating the wives equally in that respect. Rather, the equality that we treat to the wives, if you have more than one, is in terms of the nights that you spend and in terms of fulfilling your obligations to them. In those two respects, they must be treated equally. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. I'm looking through some of the questions here. Someone asked, what are single women who are responsible for transporting children and going to work outside of their city of residence supposed to do when they do not have a mahram? I mean, I guess I'm not really sure exactly what that means. So you're saying the woman lives in one city and works in a different city? So like every single day she's traveling? In this case, this woman needs to find a job in her own city or move to the other city where the job is. But she needs to settle in such a way that she's not traveling all the time. May Allah make it easy for such a person. That's a difficult situation, mashallah. But also I want to remind you though, that remember when we say cities and towns, we're not talking about the names of the towns on a map or the city limits and things like that. We're talking about the cluster of buildings. Now, very often there'll be like, for example, I live in Baltimore. Baltimore is big. You know, Baltimore has a certain city limit. And around Baltimore, you have all these other places with other names like Towson and Catonsville and White Marsh and Pikesville. From an Islamic perspective, those places are still the same city. It doesn't matter that I crossed over a city limit. There was no gap between this town and the other town, which means it's just one town. And sometimes what will happen is there'll be a town, and depending on what route you choose, like it's possible to leave town A and go to town B in such a way that it seems like they're two different towns, because when you leave town A, the buildings stopped, and now you're going through an area of wilderness where it's just woods or something, there's no buildings. And then you go to town B, which is on the other side of the woods. And so from your perspective, it looks like town B and town A are two different towns because they're separated by the woods. But in reality, there's another street you could have gone on from town A to town B, and there's buildings all along that street. There's no woods there. That particular road is completely built out. And so what it means is that town B and town A are connected to each other, which means they're actually the same town. Okay, they're Islamically the same town, even if they have different names, and even if 50 years ago they were different towns, today they're one town, because the buildings of one has stretched and extended to the point where it connected to the buildings of that town and become one town. Now, I haven't investigated this, but I think it's very likely that Baltimore and Washington, D.C. are now one city Islamically. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think it's very likely that, places that you may be regarding as two different cities, two different towns, there's a good chance that they're actually one town. I don't know where you're living at, mashallah, but, consider that the place where you work, if it's close enough that you can commute there, you can go there every morning to work and come back every day, every night. It could very well be the case that Islamically you're not traveling at all, that the two places are actually the same town. Okay. With that, let's say La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. Also, I'll remind you, for those of you who missed the very beginning, I'm going to be traveling. So next week, July 14th, we will have class, but then after that, there'll be several weeks where I will not be here. Inshallah, we'll finish the 7 hadith next week. And then when I come back, after my travel, we'll begin this book, The Straight Path of Siratul Mustaqim. But if I don't finish the 7 hadith next week, well, then we'll finish that when I come back and start the Straight Path afterwards. Barakallahu fikum. Wassalamu alaikum.